We as people really have a problem with our egos, and we have to put an end to it. So, the ego, as Freud put it, is basically the thing that you put out to the world, the face that you show those around you. It's not your internal self, it's not what you are behind the mask. The ego is the mask. So knowing this, why would we need to put all our energy into maximizing that ego and making it very strong? Because the truth of the matter is that the people with the least ego are the happiest. And what I mean by this is not that the people with no confidence are happier, but the closer your ego is with reality, the better off you are. And the reason for this is because there's nowhere for your ego to fall if it's in line with reality. This is why being unconfident when you're in unsatisfactory conditions is not necessarily a bad thing, because it teaches us to max ourselves out and try and go further instead of just having a huge ego and thinking that all the things that we do will not affect us. That's why some people don't buy into self-improvement and any of this stuff. It's not because they wouldn't benefit from the things that we're preaching, and it's not because their lives are perfect. It's mainly because their ego is so big that they can't even see the forest from the trees and comprehend that something that they can be doing might be the wrong thing to do. And because of this, they will have trouble really progressing much. And I know that I often need to put my ego in check, especially when I haven't done much introspective work for a while and I spend a lot of time around others instead of with myself. My ego tends to get out of control. And yes, it does help you in the sense that it pushes you to want to succeed to please your ego. It also prevents you from doing certain things. For me, I'll give you guys an example. I wasn't reading for years. Literally years. I didn't really read books. The last book I read was 1984 in July of 2021. And before that, it must have been 3 years since I read a book. And it's so funny because I actually love reading. And I knew this about myself, yet my ego told me that I don't need to read because I've already acquired the information I need. And that's a horrible way to look at it, because how are you supposed to learn without any humility to know that you don't know anything? The person who says he knows nothing learns the most. I'm going to repeat that. The person who says he knows nothing learns the most. It's a very strange dichotomy and paradox, but if you think about it, it makes sense. If you think you know nothing, or you say you know nothing, you'll be willing to expand your horizons into fields that you never really even knew you were interested in, because you accept that you don't know everything and you don't know what makes you tick yet. Whereas the person who is very set in their ways and thinks they know everything will be very unlikely to venture out into different fields. Like, let's say someone is into finance. That's fine. But that shouldn't prevent them from reading a book about psychology from time to time to broaden their views. My friend was just telling me about this. He was telling me how I should read a book about communism. And I immediately, my ego took over. I was like, oh, I don't agree with that, so I don't need to read anything about it. Now, it took me about 2 weeks to realize that he was actually right, and that would probably be a great way to expand your insights by reading something that you don't agree with and you don't think is the right path. And this brings us to a whole different discussion for another day. But the main topic, let's get back to that. The flaw that our ego has is the biggest flaw that we have, right? If we think that our ego is unsatisfied, we are unsatisfied. If we think that our ego is doing great and we are able to maintain this image of high, high grace among our peers and among our superiors and elders and, bosses or whatever it might be, that's a great sign that our ego is not in check, because we don't accept the flaws about ourselves and we keep telling ourselves lies that we shouldn't be. And the thing about this is, it doesn't mean that having a big ego is necessarily a bad thing, but I just think that the closer your ego is with reality, the more unlikely you are to take a fall and become sad, depressed, or any of that. Because the reason why people fall into these ruts and these negative states is because they realize something that they didn't realize before, and that usually has a lot to do with the ego, and the realization is something like, I'm not actually at this level yet. And once it clicks into place for the ego, it's very painful for us because we want to be the best, right? But in order to be the best, we actually have to put in the work, and the ego will only prevent us from doing that. Alright, it's Michael from the future here. I just want to jump in and say that basically the point I was getting at near the end of the video here is that it's much more important to understand the level that we're at and accept it than it is to put on the facade for those around us, because eventually the facade will break and we'll be forced to confront the reality. So instead of being pushed into a situation where we are literally forced against our will and against the will of our ego to face reality, we just do it ourselves and we accept that we are not at the spot that we want to be in. Set goals for yourself. Like, you can literally just write down your goals and just know them in your head and in your mind and all that. And once you have that, you can work closer and closer in achieving your goals, instead of just always telling yourself that you're at the place that you want to be. So, with this being said, enjoy the rest of the video, and I'll see you soon.